My daughter spends 6 hours cooking for everyone. My mother-in-law said, "Are you serious?" My mother-in-law laughed after one bite. "This is what your daughter made." She said it loud enough for everyone to hear. My daughter's face turned red. She started crying at the table. I stayed calm and said, "Thank you for your opinion. But before I begin, please like and subscribe to the channel. And we'd love to hear which part of the world are you joining us from. Let us know. Now let's dive into today's story. Briar Holt had learned to manage tension the way some people managed chronic pain. You felt it always, a constant pressure behind your ribs, but you learned not to show it. You smiled when you needed to smile. You stayed quiet when quiet kept the peace. You built your life around accommodation until accommodation became your entire architecture. The duplex on Maple Street in Cedar Ridge, Ohio was modest but clean. Briar had chosen the paint colors herself when they moved in 4 years ago. Soft gray in the living room, pale blue in Alohan's bedroom, colors that felt calm, neutral, safe. She had wanted a home that felt like exhaling, but some Saturdays the walls felt too thin. This Saturday, Alohan had been cooking since noon, 12 years old and determined to prove something Briar couldn't quite name. Her daughter had found a recipe online for chicken marsala. She'd written out a grocery list in careful handwriting, double-checked the spice cabinet, asked Briar to take her to the store Friday night. "I want to make dinner for everyone," Alohan had said. "A real dinner, like grown-ups make." Briar had studied her daughter's face. Alohan had her father's dark hair, but Briar's gray-green eyes. Eyes that tried too hard to read the room, to anticipate what people needed before they asked. Briar recognized that look. She'd worn it herself for years. "You don't have to prove anything," Briar had said gently. "I want to," Alohan insisted. "Please." So Briar had said yes, because sometimes you said yes even when worry settled in your stomach like stones. Now Alohan stood at the stove, flour dusted across her Star Wars t-shirt, concentration pinching her young face into something older. The kitchen smelled like butter and wine and garlic. Briar sat at the small table, close enough to help if needed, but far enough to let Alohan own this moment. "The sauce is thickening," Alohan said, stirring carefully. "Do you think that's right?" Briar came to look. The pan held something rich and dark. "Perfect. You're doing great, sweetheart." Alohan's shoulders relaxed slightly. She checked the timer on her phone. "Grandma's going to be here in 15 minutes. Briar felt the familiar tightening in her chest. "I know. Do you think she'll like it?" Briar chose her words with the precision of someone diffusing something delicate. "I think anyone would be lucky to eat a meal you worked this hard on." It wasn't quite an answer. Alohan noticed. Her stirring slowed. The sound of a car door closing outside made them both freeze. Footsteps on the porch. Not a knock. Never a knock. The front door opened without warning. Diane Holt walked into their home like she'd paid the mortgage. She was 62, but looked younger, hair professionally colored a warm brown, clothes pressed and coordinated. Everything about Diane was controlled. Her posture, her smile, the way she moved through spaces as if she were always the person who mattered most. "Where is everyone?" Diane's voice carried from the entryway, sharp and expectant. Briar stood slowly. Alohan's hand trembled slightly on the spoon. "We're in the kitchen," Briar called. Diane appeared in the doorway. Her eyes swept the room, cataloging, judging. She didn't greet Briar, didn't look at Alohan. Instead, she walked directly to the stove and lifted the lid on the rice cooker. "What's cooking?" Diane asked, though her tone suggested she'd already decided the answer wouldn't satisfy her. "Chicken marsala," Alohan said quietly. "I made it. From scratch." Diane's eyebrows rose. She moved to the stove, leaned over the pan, inhaled. Her expression shifted into something Briar recognized. Disapproval, but performed with enough subtlety that if you called it out, you'd sound paranoid. Why does it smell like that? Diane said. She opened a cabinet, pulled out a glass, filled it with water from the tap without asking. Did you follow a recipe? Yes, Elowen said. Her voice had gotten smaller. Diane opened the fridge, scanning the contents as if conducting an inspection. Where's Ethan? He'll be home soon, Briar said. She kept her voice level. He's finishing up at the office. On a Saturday? Diane shook her head. That job works him too hard. Briar said nothing. Ethan's job was fine. He left on Saturdays because his mother usually visited on Saturdays. But saying that out loud would start a fight Briar didn't have the energy for yet. Diane closed the fridge and finally looked at Elowen. Really looked the way you'd study something broken. You should wash your face before dinner. You've got something on your cheek. Elowen's hand flew to her face. The flour smudge there was barely visible. She's been cooking, Briar said. Well, now she can clean up. Diane smiled, the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. Presentation matters. Elowen turned off the burner and walked out of the kitchen without a word. Briar heard her daughter's footsteps on the stairs, quick and retreating. Diane moved to the stove, lifted the lid on the sauté pan, and made a soft noise in the back of her throat. Not quite disgust, something more dismissive. You let her cook unsupervised? Diane asked. I was right here, Briar said. That's not the same thing. Briar counted to 5 in her head. She wanted to make dinner. She worked hard on it. Diane replaced the lid with a soft clatter. Well, we'll see how it turns out. The front door opened again. Ethan's keys jangled. His footsteps moved through the house with the weight of someone who'd rather be anywhere else. Mom, Ethan said when he saw Diane. You're here. He hugged his mother. A real hug, warm and lingering. Then he glanced at Briar with something like apology in his eyes, but he didn't say anything. Just loosened his tie and asked what was for dinner. Your daughter cooked, Diane said, emphasizing the word in a way that made it sound like a problem. Ethan looked surprised. Elowen cooked? Chicken marsala, Briar said. She's been working on it all afternoon. Ethan smiled, genuine pleasure crossing his face. That's great. Where is she? Washing up, Diane said. As she should. The tension in the room was a living thing. Briar felt it pressing against her skin. Ethan must have felt it too, because he glanced between his wife and his mother, that familiar calculation happening behind his eyes. Who do I keep happy? Who do I disappoint? He chose neither. He changed the subject. I'll set the table, Ethan said. By the time they sat down to eat, Elowen had returned. Her face was scrubbed pink, her hair pulled back in a ponytail that hadn't been there before. She'd changed into a clean shirt. She looked younger now, nervous. They settled around the small dining table. Briar had set out the nice plates, the ones they only used for company. She'd put out cloth napkins. Elowen had wanted everything to feel special. The food looked beautiful. Elowen had plated it carefully, the chicken arranged just so, the sauce pooled artfully, fresh parsley scattered on top like she'd seen in cooking videos. She'd even made a salad, mixed greens with cherry tomatoes and a homemade vinaigrette. This looks wonderful, Ethan said, and he meant it. Elowen's face brightened. Thank you, Dad. Diane said nothing. She picked up her fork with the deliberate slowness of someone already preparing criticism. She cut a small piece of chicken, examined it, then placed it in her mouth. Briar watched her mother-in-law chew, watched the slight curl of Diane's lip, watched the way Diane's eyes shifted to Ethan, then to Elowen, calculating her audience. Diane laughed. Not a small sound, a full, loud laugh that cut through the quiet of the meal like something sharp. You let her make this? Diane said, looking directly at Briar. The table went still. Elowen's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Ethan's expression froze. What do you mean? Briar asked. Her voice was calm, but her pulse hammered in her throat. Diane gestured at her plate with her fork. It's barely edible. The sauce is too thin. The chicken's overcooked. Did she even use a thermometer? Mom, Ethan said quietly. What? I'm being honest. Diane took another bite, made a face, then pushed her plate away, slightly. She needs to know if she's going to cook. She needs to do it properly. Eloin's eyes filled. She didn't cry, but Briar could see the effort it took. Her daughter's jaw clenched. Her hand shook slightly as she set down her fork. Briar felt something cold and clear settle over her. This was the moment she'd been avoiding for years, the moment she'd accommodated around, negotiated with, pretended might never come. She cooked for hours, Briar said. Her voice was low but steady. She planned this. She shopped for ingredients. She followed every step of that recipe exactly. Diane waved her hand dismissively. And that's very sweet. But effort doesn't equal competence. She needs to learn to take criticism. Better to hear it from family than from strangers. She's 12, Briar said. Exactly. The perfect age to learn. Briar looked at her husband. Ethan sat frozen, his eyes fixed on his plate. He was eating mechanically, chewing without tasting, the way he always did when his mother started something. Ethan, Briar said. He didn't look up. Ethan, Briar said again, harder. He met her eyes then, and in them she saw the answer she'd been dreading. He wasn't going to do anything. He was going to let this happen. Again, Eloin stood abruptly. Her chair scraped against the floor. May I be excused? Her voice was steady, but Briar heard the break underneath. Sweetheart, Briar started. May I be excused? Eloin repeated, louder. Yes, Briar said. Eloin walked out of the dining room. Her footsteps thudded up the stairs. A door closed, not quite a slam, but close. Diane dabbed her mouth with her napkin. See? Too sensitive. That's what happens when you shield children from reality. Briar stood. The movement was controlled, deliberate. Come with me. She walked toward the kitchen. Behind her, she heard Diane's chair move. Briar, Ethan said weakly. Briar didn't turn around. She walked into the kitchen and waited. Diane followed, that same entitled certainty in her posture. Briar closed the kitchen door. They stood on opposite sides of the small room. The dinner Eloin had worked so hard on was still spread out on the counter, waiting to be stored away. The smell of garlic and wine hung in the air. You humiliated my child, Briar said. Diane crossed her arms. Her expression was almost amused. I gave her feedback. You mocked her. I was honest. You were cruel. Diane's smile tightened. Oh, here we go. Everything's cruelty with you. Do you know what your problem is, Briar? Briar waited. You're too sensitive, Diane said. Each word precisely placed. You take everything personally. You can't handle the slightest criticism without turning it into some kind of attack. This isn't about me. No, it's about you raising my granddaughter to be just as fragile as you are. Diane stepped closer. That girl needs to toughen up. The world isn't going to coddle her the way you do. She's a child, Briar said. She's allowed to be a child. She's growing soft under your influence. The accusation hung in the air between them. Briar felt the familiar pull to defend herself, to explain, to justify. She'd been doing it for 8 years, ever since she married Ethan. 8 years of managing Diane's criticism, smoothing over her comments, pretending that peace was worth more than dignity. But looking at her mother-in-law now, at the satisfaction in Diane's eyes, Briar understood something fundamental had shifted. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't poor communication. This was control. Diane liked this. She enjoyed the power of walking into someone else's home and diminishing them. She fed on the discomfort, the compliance, the way people rearrange themselves around her moods. You will not speak to my daughter like that again, Briar said. Diane's eyebrows rose. Excuse me. You heard me. I'll speak to my granddaughter however I see fit. No, Briar said. You won't. Diane laughed, a sharp sound. You don't get to dictate how I interact with my family. When you're in my home disrespecting my child, I absolutely do. You're home. Diane's smile turned cold. You mean the home my son pays for? The mortgage he carries? Or did you forget who actually provides for this family? There it was. The reminder that Briar worked part-time while Ethan worked full-time. The implication that she was less than dependent without the right to make demands. Briar held her ground. This is my daughter's home. I won't let you make her feel small in it. We'll see about that, Diane said. The way she said it, the absolute certainty, the smirk that accompanied it. Briar understood then that this was never going to end peacefully. Diane had no intention of respecting boundaries. Why would she? She'd never had to before. That night, after Diane left with a final pointed comment about hoping Aloan learns from this experience, Briar stood in the kitchen cleaning up. The food Aloan had made sat in containers now, stored away, most of it uneaten. Ethan came in as Briar was wiping down the counter. He leaned against the doorframe, hands in his pockets, that apologetic look on his face that used to work on her. That got a little intense, he said. Briar kept wiping. The motion was rhythmic, soothing. She focused on removing every trace of grease from the surface. She shouldn't have said those things, Ethan continued. I know that. Briar rinsed the cloth, wrung it out, draped it over the faucet. Then she turned to face her husband. You heard her, Briar said. You sat right there and heard every word she said to our daughter. I know. And you said nothing. Ethan shifted his weight. She's my mother, Briar. And that's my daughter. The kitchen light buzzed softly overhead. Outside, a car drove past, headlights briefly illuminating the window before fading. She didn't mean it the way you're taking it, Ethan said. His voice had taken on that placating tone, the one he used when he wanted to smooth things over without actually addressing them. Briar felt something crack inside her. Not break, just crack. A hairline fracture that had been forming for years. Don't, she said. Don't what? Don't tell me how to interpret what I heard with my own ears. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. You're blowing this out of proportion. Am I? Briar stepped closer to him. Our 12-year-old daughter spent hours making a meal to impress her grandmother. Your mother walked into our home, criticized everything, laughed at Aloan's cooking and made her cry. And you think I'm blowing it out of proportion. Mom was just being honest. Mom was being cruel. That's not fair. Briar laughed once, sharp and tired. The sound surprised even her. You always say that. Every single time she says something cutting, something mean, something designed to make someone feel small, you defend her. She didn't mean it like that. She's just being honest. You're too sensitive. Because you are too sensitive. The words landed like stones. Ethan seemed to realize what he'd said, his face tightening, but he didn't take it back. Briar felt suddenly exhausted, bone-deep tired in a way that had nothing to do with the late hour. I'm going to check on Aloan, she said. Briar. I'm done with this conversation. She walked past him. He didn't try to stop her. Upstairs, Briar knocked softly on Aloan's door. Sweetheart, can I come in? A pause. Then, okay. Briar opened the door. Aloan's room was dark except for the small lamp beside her bed. Her daughter lay on top of the covers, still fully dressed, staring at the ceiling. Briar sat on the edge of the bed. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The chicken was really good, Briar said finally. I had seconds after everyone left. Aloan didn't smile. Grandma hated it. Grandma was wrong. She said it was overcooked. It wasn't. Then why did she say that? Briar considered lying. considered softening the truth, considered protecting her daughter from understanding something ugly about the world. But Elowen deserved better than lies, because sometimes people say hurtful things to make themselves feel powerful, Briar said. It has nothing to do with you, and everything to do with them. Elowen turned her head to look at her mother. Dad didn't say anything. I know. Why not? Briar took a breath. Sometimes people we love make choices we don't understand. Sometimes they choose wrong. He always chooses her, Elowen said quietly. The truth of it settled between them. Briar wanted to deny it, to defend her husband, to protect the image of their family. But she couldn't. Not anymore. I'm sorry, Briar said. Why are you apologizing? You didn't do anything. I should have stopped it sooner. Should have protected you better. Elowen sat up. At 12, she was caught between childhood and adolescence. Her face still held roundness, but her eyes were older now. Tired in a way children's eyes shouldn't be. You tried to stand up for me, Elowen said. That's more than Dad did. Briar pulled her daughter into a hug. Elowen leaned into her, and for a moment they just held each other in the soft lamplight. I won't let her talk to you that way again, Briar whispered into Elowen's hair. She'll just come back, Elowen said. She always comes back. Briar closed her eyes. Then I'll be ready. Later that night, Briar lay in bed beside Ethan. He was already asleep, or pretending to be. She stared at the ceiling, watching shadows shift as cars passed outside. She thought about 8 years of marriage, 8 years of accommodating Diane's intrusions, 8 years of swallowing criticism, of smoothing over tension, of pretending that love meant accepting disrespect as family obligation. She thought about the way Ethan always defended his mother, not because he was malicious, not because he wanted to hurt Briar or Elowen, but because it was easier, because pushing back against Diane meant conflict, and conflict meant exhaustion, and exhaustion meant disruption to the careful balance he'd maintained his entire life. But that balance had been built on Briar's silence, on her willingness to absorb the damage, on her belief that she could love her way through it. That night, something shifted in Briar. Not a decision, not yet, but a recognition, a clear-eyed understanding that this was never going to get better, that Diane would keep pushing because no one stopped her, that Ethan would keep choosing his mother because he always had, and that Briar was tired of breaking herself trying to hold together something fundamentally broken. She didn't cry. She just lay there in the dark, feeling the weight of accumulated hurts press against her chest, and understood that change was coming whether she was ready for it or not. Diane didn't back down. Briar hadn't expected her to, but some small part of her had hoped that maybe, after that confrontation, there would be space, distance, an acknowledgement of boundaries. Instead, Diane doubled down. The phone calls started the next day. Sunday morning, while Briar was making breakfast, her phone rang. Diane's name on the screen. Briar let it go to voicemail. An hour later, another call. Then another that evening. Monday morning, another call. Briar was driving Elowen to school when her phone lit up again. Is that Grandma? Elowen asked quietly. Yes. Are you going to answer? No. Elowen nodded, staring out the window. By Tuesday, Diane had called 9 times. Briar answered none of them. She deleted the voicemails without listening. She was done giving Diane access to her peace. Wednesday afternoon, Diane showed up at the house unannounced. Briar opened the door to find her mother-in-law standing on the porch, dressed impeccably as always, carrying a covered dish. I brought chicken soup, Diane said as if nothing had happened, for Elowen, in case she's not feeling well after all that drama Saturday. The implication was clear. Elowen was the problem. Elowen's sensitivity, not Diane's cruelty. We don't need soup, Briar said. Don't be ridiculous. Every child loves homemade soup. Diane, we talked about this. Talked about what? Diane's expression was innocent, puzzled. A grandmother bringing soup to her granddaughter? About boundaries. Diane's face hardened. Boundaries. Of course. That's what you call keeping me away from my family. That's not what I said. It's what you meant. Diane shifted the dish in her hands. Are you going to let me in, or are you going to make me stand here like a stranger? Briar held the door firmly. You can't just show up without calling first. I did call. You didn't answer. Then you have your answer. Diane's eyes narrowed. This is my son's home. My granddaughter lives here. You don't get to ban me from seeing them. I'm not banning you. I'm asking you to respect our space. By ignoring my calls? By shutting me out? What am I supposed to think, Briar? What is Ethan supposed to think? There it was, the threat underneath. Ethan's opinion, Ethan's judgment, the suggestion that Briar was the unreasonable one. Ethan knows why I'm asking for space, Briar said, though she wasn't entirely sure that was true. Does he? Diane stepped closer. Because I talked to him this morning. He seemed very confused about why you're suddenly treating me like the enemy. Briar's stomach tightened. You called Ethan? Of course I called my son. He has a right to know what's going on in his own home. What did you tell him? Diane smiled. The truth. That I tried to visit, tried to bring food for my granddaughter, and you turned me away at the door. That you've been ignoring my calls. That you're trying to cut me out of their lives. Briar felt heat rise in her chest. That's not what's happening. Then what is happening, Briar? Explain it to me, because from where I'm standing, you're the one causing problems. I asked you not to speak to Aloan the way you did Saturday, and I apologize for that. No, you didn't. Well, I'm apologizing now. Diane's voice was light, dismissive. I'm sorry if my honesty hurt her feelings. I'm sorry if my desire to help my granddaughter improve was misconstrued as criticism. There. Happy. It wasn't an apology. It was a performance. Every word carefully chosen to sound reasonable, while placing blame firmly back on Briar and Aloan. I need you to leave, Briar said. Diane's expression hardened completely. Fine, but this isn't over. You can't keep me away from my family. She turned and walked back to her car, still carrying the soup. Briar closed the door and leaned against it, her heart hammering. Her phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. Mom said you wouldn't let her in the house. What's going on? Briar stared at the message. She could explain, could detail everything that had just happened, could try to make him understand. But what was the point? He'd believe what he wanted to believe. He always did. She didn't respond. The pattern continued. Diane called daily, sometimes twice daily. She left voicemails now, her voice alternating between hurt and accusatory. I don't understand why you're doing this. I miss my granddaughter. Ethan is very upset with you. You're tearing this family apart. Briar saved every message. She didn't know why yet, just instinct. The same instinct that made her start documenting everything else. Dates, times, what was said, who was present, not out of revenge, out of survival, because she could feel something building, and when it broke, she wanted proof. Ethan started coming home later. He was irritable, distant. When Briar tried to talk to him about Diane, he shut down. Can we not do this right now, he'd say. Or, I'm tired, Briar. I don't have the energy. Or, most damaging, why do you always have to make things difficult? The words started to sound familiar. Diane's words, but in Ethan's voice. Diane's framing, but from Ethan's mouth. You're being dramatic. You're holding a grudge. You're poisoning Aloan against her grandmother. That last one hit hardest, because it was exactly what Diane had accused her of. The exact phrasing. Briar heard her mother-in-law's voice underneath her husband's words. One evening in late March, Briar was helping Aloan with homework when Ethan came home carrying a bag from Aloan's favorite restaurant. Special delivery, he said, too cheerful. Elowen looked up, wary. What's the occasion? No occasion. Just wanted to do something nice. He set the bag on the table. Your grandmother suggested it, actually. She said you loved their pasta. Elowen's expression closed. I'm not hungry. Come on, honey. It's your favorite. Dad, I'm doing homework. Ethan's smile faltered. He looked at Briar, something accusatory in his eyes. See? This is what I'm talking about. What are you talking about? Briar asked carefully. She won't even accept a gift because it came from my mother. That's not what's happening. Then what is happening? Why is my daughter suddenly hostile toward her grandmother? Elowen stood abruptly. I'm not hostile. I just don't want pasta right now. She grabbed her books and left the kitchen. Her footsteps thundered up the stairs. Ethan turned on Briar. Happy now. You've successfully turned her against my mother. I haven't turned her against anyone. Diane did that herself. By bringing soup, by trying to be involved in her life, by humiliating her at dinner, by criticizing everything she does, by making her feel small. Ethan's jaw clenched. Those are your interpretations, your feelings. Maybe if you weren't so defensive, you'd see that my mother is just trying to help. Help. Briar felt something snap inside her. Is that what you call it? When she told Elowen her cooking was barely edible, when she laughed at her effort, that was helping. She was giving feedback. She was being cruel. She was being honest. The same words, the same circular argument. Briar was trapped in it, caught in a loop that had no exit because Ethan refused to see what was right in front of him. Or maybe he did see it. Maybe he just didn't care enough to do anything about it. That thought was more devastating than all of Diane's criticisms combined. I can't do this anymore, Briar said quietly. Can't do what? Defend myself to you. Explain basic kindness. Beg you to protect your daughter from someone who treats her like garbage. My mother doesn't treat her like garbage. Then you're not paying attention. Ethan grabbed his keys from the counter. I'm going for a drive. Maybe when I get back, you'll be ready to be reasonable. He left. The door closed firmly behind him. Not quite a slam, but close. Briar stood in the kitchen alone, surrounded by the remains of another failed conversation, and felt the last thread of hope dissolve. The breaking point came 3 weeks later at Elowen School. It was the spring art showcase. Students displayed projects they'd worked on all semester. Elowen had painted a series of watercolors depicting Ohio landscapes. She was proud of them, quietly proud in the way she was about everything she did. Briar had planned to attend alone, had assumed Ethan would be working. But when she arrived, she found both Ethan and Diane already there, standing by Elowen's display. Diane was talking. Elowen stood rigid beside her artwork, face pale. Briar approached quickly, catching the tail end of Diane's words. Need to work on your perspective. See how this tree looks flat? That's because you didn't consider the vanishing point. It's basic technique, sweetheart. Your teacher should have corrected this. Elowen's friends stood nearby, close enough to hear. Their expressions ranged from uncomfortable to pitying. Grandma, Elowen said softly. Please. I'm just trying to help you improve. There's no shame in constructive criticism. Briar stepped forward. That's enough. Diane turned, smile fixed. Oh, Briar. I was just explaining to Elowen how she could make her paintings even better. She doesn't need your corrections. Not here. Not now. I'm her grandmother. I have every right to discuss her work with her. Then discuss it with respect. Diane's smile tightened. I am being respectful. Just because you don't like what I'm saying doesn't make it disrespectful. Other parents were watching now. Teachers. Students. The conversation was drawing attention, becoming a scene. Briar kept her voice low but firm. You're embarrassing her in front of her friends. I'm doing no such thing. I'm being honest about her abilities. Better she hear it from someone who loves her than from some art critic down the line. She's 12. She's not submitting to critics. She's displaying work she's proud of. And maybe she shouldn't be proud of work that's mediocre. The word hung in the air. Mediocre. Said in front of Alohan's classmates, in front of her teachers, in front of everyone who'd come to celebrate the students' efforts. Alohan's eyes filled. She didn't cry, not yet, but the hurt was visible, raw and public. Briar stepped between her daughter and Diane. Leave. Excuse me. Leave. Now. You're not welcome here. Diane laughed, that same sharp sound. You can't kick me out of a public school event. Watch me. Ethan finally spoke up. Briar, calm down. Don't tell me to calm down. You're making a scene. Your mother is making a scene. I'm ending it. Diane's expression shifted into something wounded, victimized. She looked at Ethan, then at the gathering crowd. Do you see this? Do you see how she treats me? I was trying to help my granddaughter, and she's acting like I committed some kind of crime. You humiliated her, Briar said. In public. In front of her friends. I gave her feedback. You called her work mediocre. Because it is. And she needs to know that. Briar felt something inside her go completely still. Cold and clear and certain. You will not speak to me or my child again, Briar said. Each word deliberate. Diane's wounded expression vanished. You don't get to decide that. Yes, I do. I'm her mother. I decide who gets access to her. And you don't. Not anymore. Ethan, Diane said, turning to her son, are you going to let her talk to me this way? Ethan stood frozen. His face was red, caught between his mother and his wife, the position he'd spent his whole life avoiding. Briar, he said weakly, let's discuss this at home. There's nothing to discuss. Your mother will not speak to Alohan again. Not until she can treat her with basic respect. That's not your decision to make alone. Then make it with me. Right now. Choose. The silence stretched. Other conversations had stopped. Everyone was watching. Ethan looked at his mother. Looked at Briar. Looked at Alohan, standing small and hurt beside her watercolors. Let's go, he said to Diane. Not to Briar. Not defending his daughter. Taking his mother's side, even now, even here. Diane gathered her purse with exaggerated dignity. I'll remember this, Briar. I'll remember exactly how you treated me today. She walked out, Ethan following. He didn't look back at his daughter. Didn't check if she was okay. Just left. Briar turned to Alohan. Her daughter was crying now. Quiet tears tracking down her face. Come here, sweetheart, Briar said. Alohan walked into her arms. Briar held her while people around them pretended not to stare, while teachers approached with concerned expressions, while everything Briar had tried to hold together finally, irrevocably, fell apart. That night, Ethan came home late. Briar had put Alohan to bed hours ago, had sat in the dark living room waiting. When he walked in, she was ready. We need to talk, Briar said. I don't want to hear it. Ethan's voice was hard, angrier than she'd ever heard it. Too bad. He threw his keys on the table. You embarrassed my mother. You publicly humiliated her in front of the entire school. She humiliated our daughter. She was trying to help. She called Alohan's work mediocre, in front of her classmates. How is that helping? Maybe because it was true. Maybe because someone needs to give that girl a reality check instead of blowing sunshine at her constantly. The words landed like physical blows. Briar stood slowly. What did you just say? Ethan's face was flushed. You heard me. You coddle her. You tell her everything she does is perfect. That's not preparing her for the real world. She's 12. And she needs to learn. She needs to feel supported. She needs honest feedback. Then give it to her with kindness, with respect, not mockery, not cruelty. Ethan laughed bitterly. This is exactly what my mother warned me about. You're turning our daughter into a fragile little thing who can't handle any criticism. Your mother said that. And she's right. Briar felt something break. Clean and final. Pack a bag, she said. What? Pack a bag. Get out. This is my house. This is our house. And right now, I can't stand to be in it with you. Ethan's expression shifted between anger and disbelief. You're throwing me out? You chose your mother over your daughter. Again, I'm done watching you do it. I didn't choose anyone. Yes, you did. You walked out of that school with her. You left Aloan standing there crying. You defended the woman who just publicly humiliated your child. If that's not choosing, I don't know what is. My mother is family. So is your daughter. So am I, supposedly. But we've never been the family you protected. Ethan grabbed his jacket. Fine. I'll stay somewhere else tonight. But this conversation isn't over. Yes, it is. He looked at her then, really looked, and something in her expression must have told him she meant it. You're serious, he said. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. You're choosing to break up our family over this. No, Briar said. You already did. I'm just finally admitting it. Ethan left. The door closed behind him, quieter this time. Final. Briar stood in the silent house. She didn't cry, didn't feel relieved or devastated or anything specific. She just felt tired and clear and certain. She had tried. She had accommodated, negotiated, stayed quiet, kept the peace. She had twisted herself into shapes she didn't recognize, trying to make everyone happy. But happiness, bought through compromise of dignity, wasn't happiness at all. It was just survival, and she was done merely surviving. The next morning, Briar called a lawyer. The lawyer's office was small and practical. Gray walls, comfortable chairs, boxes of tissues strategically placed on every surface. The kind of space that had witnessed countless stories of marriages ending. Jennifer Morris specialized in family law. She was 45, professional without being cold, direct without being cruel. Briar had found her through a recommendation from a co-worker who'd been through her own divorce. Tell me what's going on, Jennifer said, legal pad ready. Briar had prepared for this, had thought about what to say, how to explain. But sitting there, faced with the reality of putting her marriage into words, she felt suddenly overwhelmed. My husband won't protect our daughter from his mother, Briar said finally. Jennifer waited. His mother is... Briar searched for the right word. Controlling. Critical. She comes into our home and criticizes our daughter, makes her feel worthless, and my husband defends her. Every single time. How long has this been happening? Years, but it's gotten worse. Define worse. Briar told her about the dinner, the soup, the phone calls, the school incident. As she spoke, she pulled out her phone, showing Jennifer the documentation she'd been keeping. Dates, times, screenshots of messages, voice recordings of Diane's criticisms, notes about Ethan's responses. Jennifer took it all in quietly, occasionally making notes. You've been thorough, Jennifer said when Briar finished. I didn't know what else to do. This is good. This gives us a clear picture. Jennifer set down her pen. What outcome are you hoping for? Primary custody of Aloan. Supervised visitation for Diane. Or no visitation at all, if possible. The grandmother has no legal right to visitation unless she petitions for it. But your husband does. I know. I'm not trying to keep Aloan from her father. I'm trying to keep her safe from his mother. And you believe your husband won't enforce boundaries with his mother? I know he won't. He's proven it repeatedly. Jennifer nodded slowly. Okay, here's what we're looking at. We'll file for divorce and primary custody. Will present evidence of the grandmother's behavior and your husband's failure to protect your daughter from emotional harm. Will request that any visitation your husband has must exclude his mother, or be supervised if she's present. Will that work? Depends on the judge, but you've documented everything. That works in your favor. Most custody disputes come down to what's in the best interest of the child. We can argue that exposure to the grandmother's behavior is detrimental to your daughter's emotional well-being. Breyer felt something loosen in her chest. Hope, maybe. Or just relief that someone was taking this seriously. There's going to be pushback, Jennifer continued. Your husband will likely fight this. His mother definitely will. She'll try to paint you as vindictive, as someone who's keeping a grandmother from her grandchild. Let her try. I have proof. Good, because you're going to need it. Ethan received the divorce papers at his mother's house. He'd been staying there since Breyer told him to leave. When his lawyer called Breyer's lawyer, the first thing he did was threaten to fight for full custody. He says you're unstable, Jennifer reported during their next meeting. Says you've alienated the child from his family, that you've created a hostile environment. Breyer had expected this. He's using his mother's words. Probably, but he's making the claim. We need to be ready to counter it. They were ready. When the custody mediation was scheduled, Breyer brought everything. The documentation, the messages, character witnesses from Eloan's teachers who'd seen Diane's behavior at the school, a letter from Eloan's pediatrician noting increased anxiety and stress-related symptoms. The mediation took place in a conference room with bland corporate art on the walls. Ethan sat across from Breyer with his lawyer, a stern woman in her 50s who looked like she litigated for sport. Diane had tried to attend. Jennifer had blocked it immediately. She's not a party to this proceeding, Jennifer said. Diane's presence loomed anyway. Every argument Ethan's lawyer made, every accusation, sounded like Diane's voice. Mrs. Holt has shown concerning behavior, Ethan's lawyer began. She's isolated the child from her grandmother without cause. She's made unilateral decisions about family relationships. She's created conflict where none existed. Jennifer responded calmly. Mrs. Holt has protected her daughter from emotional abuse. She's documented years of controlling behavior and verbal cruelty from the child's grandmother. She's asked repeatedly for her husband to establish boundaries, and he's refused. That's subjective interpretation, Ethan's lawyer countered. What Mrs. Holt calls abuse, others might call grandmotherly concern. Then let's look at the objective facts. Jennifer opened her folder. On March 7th, Mrs. Diane Holt told the child, and I quote, "Your cooking is barely edible." She did this in front of the family after the child spent hours preparing a meal. She continued, laying out incident after incident. The soup delivery, the phone calls, the school event where Diane called Eloan's artwork mediocre. All documented, Jennifer said, all corroborated by witnesses. Ethan's lawyer shifted tactics. The grandmother may have been harsh, but that doesn't justify cutting her out of the child's life entirely. Mrs. Holt didn't cut her out. She established boundaries. The grandmother refused to respect them. Mr. Holt refused to enforce them. Ethan spoke then, his voice tight. She's my mother. She loves Eloan. Breyer looked at her husband. He looked tired, older. There were lines around his eyes she didn't remember seeing before. I know she loves Eloan, Breyer said quietly, but love without respect is harm. She's just trying to help. By making our daughter feel worthless. By preparing her for the world. The world is already hard enough, Breyer said. Home should be safe. The mediator, a calm woman in her 60s, intervened. Let's focus on the child's well-being. That's what we're here to determine. They continued for 3 hours. Back and forth. Evidence presented, arguments made. Ethan grew increasingly defensive as Jennifer laid out the timeline of Diane's behavior and his enabling responses. At one point, Ethan's lawyer presented text messages between Ethan and Briar. Messages where Briar seemed short, seemed unreasonable. Jennifer had been ready for this too. These messages lack context, she said. Let me provide it. She showed the messages that preceded each one. Diane's criticisms, Ethan's dismissals, Briar's repeated, patient requests for support. The picture that emerged wasn't of an unreasonable wife. It was of a woman pushed to breaking point. The mediator called for a break. When they reconvened, she addressed both parties directly. I've reviewed all the evidence, she said. I've considered the testimony and the documentation. In cases like these, my role is to determine what arrangement serves the child's best interest. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. It's clear that the grandmother's behavior has been detrimental. It's also clear that Mr. Holt has been unable or unwilling to establish appropriate boundaries to protect his daughter from that behavior. Ethan started to object. The mediator held up a hand. I'm not making moral judgments. I'm assessing safety and well-being. A child needs to feel safe in both parents' homes. Right now, I cannot be confident that she would feel safe in Mr. Holt's care if his mother has unrestricted access. She's my mother, Ethan said again, as if that explained everything. And Eloan is your daughter, the mediator replied. She deserves protection. The ruling came down, clearly. Primary custody to Briar. Ethan would have visitation rights, but any time with his mother present had to be supervised by a court-appointed supervisor for the first 6 months. After that, the arrangement would be reassessed. Diane was barred from independent contact with Eloan until the child turned 18, unless Briar gave explicit permission. Ethan's face went pale when he heard the terms. You're taking my daughter away. No, the mediator said. You will still have significant time with her. But you'll need to demonstrate that you can prioritize her emotional safety over your mother's feelings. Briar felt no triumph, no satisfaction, just exhaustion and relief that someone in authority had finally seen what she'd been seeing for years. Outside the building, Jennifer squeezed Briar's shoulder. You did good in there. I just want it to be over. It's mostly over. There will be some paperwork to finalize, but the hard part is done. Briar nodded, not entirely convinced. She knew Diane wouldn't accept this quietly, knew there would be attempts to circumvent the ruling, to find loopholes, to maintain control. But for the first time in years, Briar had legal backing, had boundaries with teeth, had protection that didn't rely on Ethan's willingness to enforce it. A week later, Ethan showed up at the house. It was his first visit since the mediation. He looked defeated in a way Briar had never seen. They sat in the living room, that careful distance between them that used to be intimacy. I didn't realize, Ethan said finally. Briar waited. Everything you said about my mother, about how she treats Eloan. I didn't see it. You saw it. You just didn't want to believe it. Ethan ran his hands through his hair. The gesture was familiar, achingly so. I thought you were exaggerating. I thought you were being too protective. I was being a mother. I know that now. Briar studied him, looked for signs of real understanding, not just performative regret. Do you? Or are you just saying what you think I want to hear? I read everything, all the documentation you presented, the messages, the incidents, all of it. He looked up at her. When it was laid out like that, timeline and evidence and witnesses, I couldn't deny it anymore. You could have seen it years ago if you'd wanted to. I didn't want to. You're right about that. Ethan's voice cracked slightly. She's my mother. I've spent my whole life managing her, trying to keep her happy. It was easier to believe she meant well than to accept she was hurting people. She was hurting your daughter. I know. And I told you. Repeatedly. For years. I know. Briar felt no satisfaction in his admission. Just a deep, persistent sadness. Why are you here, Ethan? I want to apologize. Really apologize. Okay. And I want to ask if there's any way we can fix this. The marriage, the family. Briar had known this was coming, had prepared her answer. No, she said simply. Ethan's expression crumpled. Briar, you've had chances, so many chances. I asked you to protect us. I asked you to choose us. You chose her every time. I'm choosing differently now. Because you were forced to. Because a mediator laid out the consequences. Not because you wanted to. That's not fair. Isn't it? Briar leaned forward. If that mediation had gone differently, if you'd been awarded primary custody, would you enforce those boundaries with your mother? Would you keep Elowen safe from her? Ethan opened his mouth, closed it. The answer was written in his silence. You wouldn't, Briar said quietly. You'd let her back in. You'd make excuses. You'd tell Elowen she needs to forgive, to understand, to give Grandma another chance. Because that's what you've always done. I would protect her. You'd try, and then your mother would cry or manipulate or threaten, and you'd cave, like you always do. Ethan stood abruptly. You can't forgive me. That's what this is really about. No, I could forgive you, but I can't trust you, and I can't build a life with someone I don't trust to protect our child. So that's it. 8 years of marriage just over. You ended it, Briar said. The first time you let her insult Elowen and said nothing. The second time, the 20th time, you ended it piece by piece every time you chose your mother over your family. Ethan grabbed his jacket. At the door, he turned back. I really am sorry. I believe you, Briar said. But sorry doesn't undo damage, and it doesn't rebuild trust. He left. The door closed with a soft click. Briar sat in the silence. She didn't cry, didn't feel relieved or devastated, just tired and clear-eyed and certain she'd made the right choice. 3 months later, on a Saturday afternoon in early June, Briar and Elowen were in the kitchen together. They were making chocolate chip cookies. Elowen measured ingredients while Briar preheated the oven. The kitchen smelled like vanilla and butter. Late afternoon sunlight streamed through the window, turning everything golden. They worked in comfortable quiet, the kind that didn't need filling. Elowen had started smiling more, had started sleeping through the night, had stopped flinching when someone criticized her work at school. Mom. Elowen said, stirring the dough. Yeah. She won't come back, right? Grandma. The question was tentative. Afraid to voice, but needing the answer. Briar set down the measuring cup and looked at her daughter. No, sweetheart. She doesn't get access to people she hurts. Elowen nodded slowly. What if Dad wants her to see me? He can want that all he likes. But he doesn't get to decide. Not anymore. The court decided, and I decide, and we both decided to keep you safe. What if she shows up anyway? Then we call the police. We follow the court order. We protect our peace. Elowen stirred the dough, thoughtful. I feel bad sometimes. Like maybe I should forgive her. Briar moved to sit beside her daughter. Listen to me. Forgiveness is a gift you give yourself, not an obligation you owe anyone else. If you want to forgive her someday, that's your choice. But you don't have to let her hurt you in order to prove you're a good person. But she's family. Family is supposed to make you feel safe, loved, supported. If someone makes you feel small and scared and worthless, they're not acting like family. They're just people you're related to. Elowen considered this. Do you think she'll ever change? I don't know. Maybe. But it's not your job to wait around and find out. It's not your job to absorb damage while hoping someone becomes kinder. Dad says she loves me. She probably does in her way. But love without respect is just control. And you deserve better than that. They returned to the cookies, scooped dough onto baking sheets, slid them into the oven, set the timer. While the cookies baked, they sat at the kitchen table. Elowen had brought down her sketchbook. She was drawing something, her pencil moving confidently across the page. Briar watched her daughter work. Watched the way Eloan's expression had softened, the tension that used to live in her shoulders finally releasing. This was what safety looked like. Not perfection, not the absence of problems, just a space where a child could exist without constantly monitoring threats, where she could make mistakes and try new things and trust that the adults around her would protect rather than harm her. "I'm proud of you," Briar said suddenly. Eloan looked up, surprised. "For what?" "For being brave. For surviving all that and still being kind. Still trying. Still creating things." Eloan's cheeks flushed. "I'm just drawing." "You're doing more than that. You're healing. You're learning that you matter, that your feelings are valid, that you don't have to earn the right to be treated with respect. You taught me that. We taught each other." The timer beeped. They pulled the cookies from the oven, perfect golden brown. The kitchen filled with warmth and sweetness. They ate cookies while they were still soft, chocolate melting on their tongues, and Briar felt something settle in her chest. Not happiness exactly. Something quieter, but more durable. Peace. She'd spent years trying to keep everyone happy, trying to hold together a family that was breaking under the weight of one person's need for control. She'd twisted herself into shapes she didn't recognize, had swallowed hurts she didn't deserve, had asked her daughter to accept unacceptable things. And in the end, it had taken losing her marriage to save her daughter. But sitting here in this kitchen, with this child who was finally learning to breathe freely, Briar knew she'd made the right choice. She hadn't won by shouting, hadn't won by being cruel back, hadn't won by revenge or manipulation. She'd won by choosing her child over everyone else, by drawing a line and refusing to move it, by protecting the person who couldn't protect herself. And she would do it again, without hesitation, 1,000 times over. Every single time. Eloan reached for another cookie, smiled at her mother, a real smile, unguarded and full. "These are really good," Eloan said. "They are," Briar agreed. And in that moment, in that kitchen, with cookies cooling and sunlight streaming and peace finally settling into place, Briar understood something fundamental. She'd lost a husband who wouldn't protect her. She'd lost a mother-in-law who never respected her. But she'd kept her daughter, kept her safe, kept her whole. And that was worth everything.